The Chinese Grand Prix was yet another slow burn thriller, with moment-to-moment decisions making all the difference. From the front three fight between the McLarens and Russel to the midfield maelstrom, the Shanghai International Circuit did what it normally does and allowed drivers to shine on its unorthodox and challenging layout. Turn 1 overtakes, hair-raising hairpin battles, and strategy calls releasing drivers at the right time to let them off the chain, with the likes of Ollie Bearman putting on an absolute clinic. Some drivers, however, struggled to even start to challenge, and the scrutiny on Liam Lawson has just become all the more intense following yet another back-of-the-grid finish. Want to know why Liam Lawson is not actually to blame for Red Bull's shortcomings? Before you start to lose it in the comments, it's worth sticking around to hear what we have to say, as even the team boss acknowledges it's not the Kiwis' fault. So how did events unfold at the Shanghai International Circuit? While a 1-2 for McLaren was fairly predictable when moving into the weekend based off of their Australian and testing performance, it certainly didn't come without complication in China. Even as early as the race start, George Russell only lost out on his P2 grid slot due to a first corner move on Oscar Piastri that very nearly paid off. But he was ultimately overtaken by an opportunistic Norris, who made the most of the move. The two McLarens were kept honest for the majority of the race by Russell and the chasing Ferraris, and Norris in particular will be glad to see the checkered flag at the end of 56 laps, as his brake issues that plagued him into the final 12 or so laps looked to be a breaking point come the end of the race, with Russell closing the 5-second gap rapidly and set to overtake Norris into turn 1 if the checkered flag hadn't come. Now behind the top 3 was where the slow burn thriller took place, with pit stop timing being all important as winners and losers were decided by pitting a mere lap apart. The likes of Sainz and Hadjar were ultimately left in a position that they could not fight back from, whilst the perfect timing of Ocon and Albon allowed them to maximise their points, making the most of their races and only finishing behind those you would expect in the top 4 teams, aside from Ocon beating the Mercedes of Antonelli on pace alone, making Haas's double points finish all the more impressive. While the rookies this season are all doing a pretty good job, the standout today was Ollie Bearman, who drove an absolute blinder from P17, proving once again that his Ferrari sub-heroics in Jeddah were no fluke. The fact that 2 races in we have already seen 9 out of the 10 teams scoring points, and some teams should have scored far more than they have already done down to misfortune alone, is a brilliant sign as to just how competitive the field is this season. RB and Alpine won't be at the back of the pack for much longer if their potential is acted upon, so even if McLaren go on to win the first 9 rounds before the Barcelona change, something we doubt will come to pass, there will still be some brilliant storylines starting to boil away in the background. One storyline, however, that's starting to get a bit hard to look at is the ongoing nightmare in the second Red Bull seat. Let's get one thing straight. Liam Lawson is a tidy driver. He's proven so in multiple race disciplines, beating Alex Albon over in the Super Formula and doing well enough in an RB last year to get the call up to Red Bull. The theory that Lawson just simply is no good is just plain wrong, and the fact that drivers with more experience and outright pace, such as Checo, who was pulling some seriously crappy cars into the points places over the last decade, have struggled with the Red Bull car, is the sign that there is something seriously wrong with their approach. But Max Verstappen? Yes, Max is still finishing in the top 5 and doing very well, being 3rd in the constructors on his own, beating Ferrari single-handedly, but even he has conceded that the car is very difficult to drive this year. If he is struggling in a car that is tailor-made for him, that clearly suits his driving style alone, then a guy who doesn't drive in the same way is going to find the RB21 a living hell. Before the race, Max spoke sympathetically about the Kiwi struggles in the car, saying, "If you looked at Liam at Racing Bulls, actually he was quite similar with Yuki. There was not a whole lot of difference between them, I thought. Otherwise, of course, the team wouldn't make that choice to put Liam in. And now suddenly that gap is very big, and they are also very close to me, so that tells you something. When I talk to Liam, the Racing Bulls car is definitely easier to drive than our car." But according to both the incredibly sympathetic and understanding Helmut Marko and team boss Christian Horner, fast cars are always hard to drive, which is categorically an absolute lie. Even if this was the case, which would go against the eye test of previous championship-winning cars, even Red Bull's own championship winner from 2021 for example, the Red Bull car this year isn't even that fast. If it was a rocket ship that Lawson simply couldn't get under control due to driver skill alone, that'd be pretty apparent as Max disappears down the road by 30 seconds, but that is not happening. Instead, Max is floating just outside the podium positions, incapable of punching upwards, but doing well enough to keep the Ferraris behind. But there has so far been no proof that the car is giving even Max Verstappen enough to move forwards. The sprint on Saturday demonstrated just how toothless the Red Bull is, as he was not only incapable of getting past the Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton, but he was also swallowed up and unable to put up a fight against Oscar Piastri. The Red Bull, as it stands, is the 4th fastest car, so the whole argument that Lawson just cannot handle a fast car is frankly laughable. Christian Horner seems to be the voice of reason in the Red Bull camp at the moment, as Helmut Marko continues to make himself more and more detestable with his gross attitude towards rookie drivers under the Red Bull moniker, as Horner revealed that the real goal of the Chinese Grand Prix for Lawson was to try and unlock the best way to help the Kiwi get more out of the clearly lacking Red Bull package. We made the decision to take him off the grid, out of Parc Fermé, to try some radical changes on the setup because you're so limited on testing with these cars, so it made sense to say, we are starting at the back, let's try and learn something. We have 56 laps of information with a radically different setup on the car. That gives huge information back into the factory and system as we look to improve on our performance. Liam is a great little racer. He gets his elbows out, races hard, but is just struggling at the moment, finding the limit with this car and getting the most out of the car. As a team, we are looking to support him in the best way we can. Which is something that Bernie Collins found quite ridiculous in light of the fact that they limited Liam's testing pre-season compared to the likes of, say, Antonelli, who got plenty more practice in a representative car. The question is, if Red Bull cannot find a way to support Liam Lawson, what then? As much as Yuki has demonstrated typical bravado saying he's 100% ready to step into the Red Bull if he was called upon, it's not like he was blowing Lawson out of the water in the latter stages of last year. While his experience will likely give him some more tools in taking on the Red Bull car, there's a big possibility he'd be worse off than he currently is in the RB. Yuki was unfortunate in China, as yet again his respectable point-scoring position was stolen away from him through no fault of his own. Last week, the weather and strategy left him pointless, and this week, his front wing falling apart seemingly on its own was yet another stroke of misfortune for the Japanese driver. However, the fact that he isn't finishing in P6 every race as the sprint demonstrated was possible will likely save him from being promoted into the Poison Chalice second Red Bull seat. However, even if he is maximizing the car, Yuki will likely still be ignored by Red Bull according to Helmut Marko. Yuki Tsunoda in the first race and the sprint race was competitive, no mistakes. But even more impressive was Hadjar at his second race. He didn't know the circuit here and he's like 7th, so that's even more impressive. It shows that the junior program is working, and also that Racing Bulls made a car which is competitive and obviously easier to drive. However, when he was asked if Red Bull will continue to ignore Yuki's obvious potential, Marko replied, "Let's discuss when it happens. Yuki is driving for his future, that's what matters, and he's now doing very well." Lawson is sadly in a position where he was good enough to get called up, but is doing no better than the man that he replaced for very similar reasons. The issue is, some fans are morons. They will simply just see the result and go, well, Lawson is just clearly a bad driver, justice for Yuki, he will do so much better. The evidence suggests that Red Bull have once again designed a monster that only one man can tame, and even then, the masterful Max Verstappen is having troubles with the RB21. Let's just hope that based off of China, Red Bull can finally figure out how to design a drivable car without the help of Adrian Newey.